Hello. So sorry I'm a few minutes late. Wasn't paying attention to the time. Oops, turn my sound down on here. So we'll wait a little bit for people to get on. And in the meantime, I am Jax West. I am a supporter. I am not related to Stephen. I just run Stephen Avery Project. People always inevitably ask me that question on who are you? So what I'm going to do, I'm pulling up on my other screen here, is we got the filing today for Judge Flowers' denial that was filed yesterday on the 8th. And we have it posted here in Stephen Avery Project. And so you should be able to find it and read it for yourself. But people typically ask if I'll read and do a live. So I scheduled this yesterday that we would go live today because people were asking me yesterday to read it. We didn't have it then. I actually didn't even, I just assumed somebody else would have it, excuse me, and it would be discussed. But then today, nobody still had it. So I got it. And so what I'm going to do is I will be reading this. And while I read it, any questions or comments that come up here, I won't be responding to them because I'm going to read this. It's 14 pages long. Well, I guess 13. Before, I don't know if Christy's going to comment on that. Christy, one of the moderators, is very upset that they charge me per page for this. And so I was charged for 14 pages, and one of the pages in the middle of this is blank. And I don't have a hard copy. It's something they email me. So it's not like I'm printing, I'm paying per page to print out. You know, it's just an email thing. So what I will be doing is I'm just going to be reading this. I won't go over your comments, and then we will discuss at the end. All right. So starts with, this case was remanded to this court for consideration of claims made by the defendant for relief from what he asserts was the state's violation of Wisconsin Statute 968.205 and the subsequent violation of his constitutional rights pursuant to the ruling in Youngblood versus Arizona. A prior motion to the Court of Appeals was denied. The defendant alleges that on January 24, 2019, his current post-conviction counsel received a previously undisclosed police report. The report, dated September 20, 2011, was written by Deputy Jeremy Hawkins of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. The defendant further alleges that his counsel received a previously undisclosed ledger sheet on or about the same date that identified the material that was the subject of Deputy Hawkins' report. The report of Deputy Hawkins indicates that he, Sergeant Investigator Mark Wiegert, Attorney Thomas Fallon, and Attorney Norman Gahn removed materials stored in evidence and released them to the Hallback family. The officers and attorneys identified which tagged items of evidence were alleged to contain human bone or possible human bone fragments. In order to accomplish this task, the parties used a report of Dr. Leslie Eisenberg, the forensic anthropologist called as a witness by the prosecution in this matter. Deputy Hawkins used Dr. Eisenberg's report to identify evidence identified as having come from the gravel pit, southwest of the Avery property, in deciding which materials were to be returned to the Hallback family. The defendant alleges that the state violated the Preservation of Evidence Statute, Wisconsin Statute 968.205, which requires law enforcement agencies to retain evidence as long as a convicted individual is in custody or until his or her mandatory release date. Additionally, the defendant asserts, my dog's right underneath my chair, and I tried to put my feet down, and she's down there, so I had to move my feet. Okay. Additionally, the defendant asserts that his constitutional rights were violated when he was deprived of the opportunity to have the alleged human remains tested. If such a test proved that the material marked with the designated evidence tags were human remains and could be identified as those of the victim, the defendant asserts that it would establish that the evidence that led to his conviction was planted by the real killer in this crime. On January 24, 2019, the defendant filed a motion with the Court of Appeals requesting that the appeal in this matter be stayed and remanded to the Circuit Court to review the circumstances regarding the withholding of the records and the release of the evidentiary materials to the Hallback family. Additional documents were filed by both the state and the defense regarding this motion. On February 25, 2019, the Court of Appeals granted the motion to remand these issues to the Circuit Court for consideration and decision on the issues. That decision will then be permitted to be included in the continued primary appeal before the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals was clear that the supplemental motion was restricted to reviewing whether the state violated Wisconsin Statute 968.205 and how such a violation would affect the constitutional rights of the defendant. As such, the court will limit its review to these issues alone. As the defendant stated in his brief, quote, Mr. Avery is not stating a sufficiency of evidence or ineffective assistance of counsel claim relating to inadequate testing of bone fragments. Rather, Mr. Avery's claims pertain to the constitutional violation stemming from the state's destruction of the human bone fragment evidence. The retesting of the bones is relevant to this constitutional claim on the matter of the exculpatory nature of the destroyed evidence. However, the retesting of the bone fragments is not a claim in its own right, unquote. Now we're on page 4. However, before the court addresses the primary issue, it feels compelled to address the recusal motion brought by the defendant. It is apparent from the record that there are no grounds upon which to grant that relief. The civil case referred to by the defendant, in which he was named as a party, was judicially reassigned to this court, but the case was immediately stayed pending the resolution of the defendant's criminal appeal. Before any proceedings were conducted by this court, the matter was voluntarily dismissed. The court neither examined any evidence nor issued any rulings in the civil case, other than to grant the motion for voluntary dismissal. The administrative assignment of the defendant's civil case to this court does not form the grounds for a recusal in this action. As further evidence in support of the request for recusal, the defendant argues that this judge served on the Crime Victims' Rights Board along with District Attorney Kratz during the time that the original trial in this matter was being heard. The defendant asserts that by being on the same volunteer committee with the prosecutor at the time of the trial, the judge in this matter must recuse herself. The defendant relies on SCR 60.044C for this proposition. However, and I see somebody saying, could you not just sum it up? Yes, I can, but people ask me to read it in its entirety, and then we sum up at the end. I understand people who don't want to hear the whole thing, but some people do. So that's what I do here. So sorry about that. However, that provision of the judicial code applies to judges who have practiced law with attorneys involved in matters before the court. This judge never practiced law or participated as co-counsel with Attorney Kratz on the defendant's criminal trial or in any other matter. At the time in question, this judge was not serving on the bench and was a citizen member of the Crime Victims' Rights Board. The fact that Attorney Kratz was on the same voluntary public board at the same time as this judge cannot be defined as the practice of law. The defendant has offered, the defendant has offered no grounds upon which the court should recuse itself. Further, the court must comment on the defendant's objection to the state's response brief. In another motion before the court, submitted April 11, 2019, the defendant asks for leave to file a supplemental response brief in this matter, or, in the alternative, to strike the state's response brief as being unauthorized under the remand order of the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals states in its order that this court shall conduct any proceedings necessary to address claims in the supplemental motion submitted by the defendant. The order acknowledges the defendant's position on this matter and determines that the best course of action is to have this issue developed and litigated while the matter is still relatively fresh and not, and they emphasize this, procedurally barred. The defendant echoes this argument in his filings, asserting that his motion should not be procedurally barred and that all claims raised by this motion should be heard by the circuit court. Both parties have filed briefs in this matter, and all arguments will be considered. Regarding the issue at hand, this court has been charged with determining whether Wisconsin Statute 968.205 has been violated by the state during the post-conviction period, and whether any such violation of the statute deprived the defendant of the rights provided to him via the ruling of Youngblood versus Arizona. Both parties submit numerous arguments and allegations in their briefs. However, the court will address only those arguments that focus on the charge given to it by the Court of Appeals. Wisconsin Statute 968.275 states, except as provided in sub 3, if physical evidence that is in possession of a law enforcement agency includes any biological material that was collected in connection with a criminal investigation that resulted in a criminal conviction, and the biological material is from and this is emphasized, from a victim of the offense that was the subject of the criminal investigation, or may be, emphasized, reasonably used to incriminate or exculpate any person for the offense. The law enforcement agency shall preserve the physical evidence until every person in custody as a result of the conviction has reached his or her discharge date. The first clause of the statute does not apply to this matter. None of the material returned to the Halbach family was scientifically identified as the physical remains of Teresa Halbach. No DNA testing was performed on material returned to the family that conclusively identified the material as belonging to a human being or any specific individual. Indeed, at the time of trial, the FBI crime lab indicated that DNA testing could not be done on the evidence submitted, precluding identification of the remains as being those of the victim. Without such identification, the evidence in question cannot, within the plain language of the statute, be identified as biological material from the victim of the offense at issue in this case. However, this does not end the inquiry into this matter. The second clause of the statute may apply in the case before the court. The defense argues that the evidentiary material returned to the Halbach family might reasonably have been used to exculpate Mr. Avery or establish that biological evidence was planted on his property to incriminate the defendant in this matter. The defense argues that the evidence recovered from the quarry site may have proved that the victim was not killed on the Avery property, as argued by the prosecutor, and that the evidence found on the grounds of Avery salvage was planted there by the real offender in this matter to incriminate Mr. Avery. Because that evidence is no longer available to the defense for testing, the defense argues that it can no longer use the material to exculpate Mr. Avery of this offense. Furthermore, the defense argues that the state further violated the statute by not providing the required notice to the defendant or his counsel prior to disposing of the evidence, preventing the defendant from exercising his opportunity to object to its release or destruction. Wisconsin Statute 968.205 provides that a law enforcement agency may destroy evidence covered by the statute before the time specified in sub 2 only if all of the following applies. A, the law enforcement agency sends a notice of its intent to destroy the evidence to all persons who remain in custody as a result of the criminal conviction, and to either the attorney of record for each person in custody or the state public defender. Subsection 4 of the statute provides what shall be included in such notice. A notice provided under sub 3A shall clearly inform the recipient that the evidence will be destroyed unless within 90 days after the date on which the person receives the notice, either a motion for testing of the evidence is filed under section 974.02 or a written request for the retention of the evidence is submitted to the law enforcement agency. There is no dispute that the evidence in question was released to the Hallback family without the statutorily required notice under subsections 2 and 4 being provided to the defendant or the defense attorney of record in this case. However, the inquiry into this matter is not terminated with this issue. In order for the statute to apply, the evidence in question must reasonably be used to incriminate or exculpate a defendant for the offense. The ruling in State versus Greenwald incorporated both of the tests cited by the defendant, outlining the constitutional requirements of the state's responsibility to preserve evidence as set forth in California versus Trombetta and Youngblood versus Arizona. The state's failure to preserve evidence violates a defendant's due process rights if law enforcement 1. failed to preserve evidence that is apparently exculpatory, or 2. acted in bad faith by failing to preserve evidence that is potentially exculpatory. Greenwald at 67. The defense is correct in asserting that Wisconsin courts have applied the reasoning in these cases to the post-conviction destruction of evidence. In order to establish that the evidence in question was apparently exculpatory, a defendant must demonstrate that the evidence possessed exculpatory value that was apparent to those who had custody of the evidence before it was destroyed. It is not enough to simply allege that destroyed evidence had the possibility of being exculpatory. Evidence does not have apparent exculpatory value if analysis of the evidence would have provided an avenue of investigation that might have led in any number of directions. The defendant argues that the evidence returned to the Hallback family contained human remains that, if tested under currently available DNA testing, specifically anti-rapid DNA analysis, could be conclusive in identifying the remains as belonging to the victim, Teresa Hallback. However, it must be noted that the defendant begins his argument with the conclusion that the evidence turned over to the Hallback family were, in fact, human remains. The defendant points to several portions of the record where the evidence that was collected from the quarry site was listed in police documents or reports as human remains. The defendant specifically cites the police report of Deputy Hawkins dated September 20, 2011 in support of his claim. In that document, Deputy Hawkins writes that he, Sergeant Investigator Mark Wiegert, Attorney Thomas Fallon, and Attorney Gahn removed evidence with property tag numbers that were listed as having contained human bones. They determined which of the evidence samples contained human bone by using a report authored by Dr. Leslie Eisenberg. Dr. Eisenberg was the forensic anthropologist called as an expert witness by the prosecution to identify the evidence collected from various locations during the investigation of this case. The record in this case contains more than one document created by Dr. Eisenberg, and the report written by Deputy Hawkins doesn't identify the specific document used by the parties on that date. In her final report submitted to District Attorney Kratz on December 6, 2006, Dr. Eisenberg set forth her conclusions identifying which evidence supplied for analysis contained human bone fragments and what was identified as material other than human in origin. On February 28, 2007 and March 1, 2007, Dr. Eisenberg testified at the defendant's trial. She was questioned extensively by both Prosecutor Fallon and Attorney Strang regarding her conclusions in that final report. On March 1, 2007, Attorney Strang cross-examined Dr. Eisenberg. Attorney Strang questioned the doctor about material discovered in the investigative area referred, and now this is the blank page, to as the quarry to investigate reports. During his cross-examination, Attorney Strang asked the doctor about 2 fragments of material that appeared to be pelvic bone. However, Dr. Eisenberg testified that she was not able to conclude with scientific certainty that the fragment were pelvic bone or that they were human in origin. After questioning the doctor about other aspects of the opinions in her report, Attorney Strang returned to the evidentiary material found in the quarry. Dr. Eisenberg testified that at the time of writing her report in December of 2006, she could identify that 8 of the fragments were burned and 1 of the fragments was definitely not human. She qualified that her opinion on the material was, at that point of her analysis, as much as she knew about the identifications at that point in time. If continued cross-examination, Dr. Eisenberg once again confirmed that the quarry area contained suspected, possibly human bones. Attorney Fallon conducted a redirect examination. Attorney Fallon asked Dr. Eisenberg to clarify her opinion on the nature of the fragments found in the gravel pit at the quarry southwest of the Avery property. Attorney Fallon asked if, in her original analysis, the doctor was only able to determine that 1 fragment of the material recovered from the quarry was non-human. Dr. Eisenberg confirmed that. He then asked if, in subsequent review and analysis, the doctor had determined that several more of the fragments were non-human. Dr. Eisenberg responded that of all of the fragments, only 3 were identifiable as being possibly human in origin. Responding to a question from Attorney Fallon, the doctor confirmed that she could not, to a reasonable degree of anthropological or scientific certainty, identify any of the fragments as human bone. On cross-examination, Dr. Eisenberg stated that the material from the quarry location did, in fact, contain non-human bone that was intact. The doctor confirmed that burned bone fragments could be found in all 3 sites where evidentiary material was found. However, she could not confirm with any degree of scientific certainty that any of the bones from the quarry were human in origin. As previously stated, pursuant to the ruling in Greenwald, for evidence to be, quote, apparently exculpatory, unquote, to law enforcement, the defendant must demonstrate that the evidence possessed exculpatory value apparent to those who had custody of the evidence before it was destroyed. In this case, the defendant cannot meet his burden. While the defendant points to the report of Deputy Hawkins, which indicates that human bones taken from the quarry were returned to the Hallback family, the statement of the deputy does not transform the physical material from what it is into what he declares it to be on the form. Dr. Eisenberg testified at trial that the evidence taken from the quarry could not be identified as human remains. The FBI could not test the bones to determine if the fragments were human remains, or if so, to whom the bones belonged. Nothing of record indicates that in 2011, when the material was given to the Hallback family, the material was reclassified as human bone. The law enforcement officers and attorneys involved in the release of the evidence used a prior written report of Dr. Eisenberg, written before her testimony under oath, to select what material would be given to the Hallback family. Dr. Eisenberg clarified her opinion in her trial testimony and confirmed that none of the material found in the quarry could be identified as human bone fragments. Furthermore, the FBI confirmed that the fragments could not be tested for DNA to confirm whether the fragments were human or identified as those of the victim. Under those circumstances, it cannot be said that the materials released from evidence would have been apparently exculpatory to anyone. There was no scientific evidence or record at the time that the material was released to support that human biological material was being released or that the material was known to be the remains of the victim. The defense argues that it would be absurd for the state to release the bone fragments to the Hallback family if it didn't believe that the material released was the remains of the victim. Therefore, the defendant argues the state acknowledged that the material released was apparently exculpatory. However, Even if law enforcement believed that the material was human bone, their belief would not be founded in science or any final evidence produced during the investigation or trial. They would be acting on an unfounded belief rather than the reasonable belief as required by the Greenwald test. Individual belief does not transmute one form of matter into another. Nothing supports the position that the materials released were apparently exculpatory. Even if the defendant cannot meet the burden that the material released was apparently exculpatory, the defendant may meet the constitutional test for a violation of his rights under Greenwald if he can establish that the state acted in bad faith by failing to preserve evidence that is potentially exculpatory. To establish bad faith, the defendant must show that law enforcement was aware of the potentially exculpatory value of the evidence, and they failed to preserve and acted with either official animus or a conscious attempt to suppress evidence. In this matter, the defendant cannot show that the state knew of the potential exculpatory value of the evidence. As stated above, Dr. Eisenberg testified that the remains could not be identified as being of human origin, and the FBI confirmed that evidence could not be tested to confirm whether the material was from a human being or that they were the remains of the victim. Dr. Eisenberg also testified that the material found in the quarry, tagged as number 8675, was largely unburned. This does not support the defendant's argument that the victim was murdered and burned in a place other than the Avery property and placed there at a later date. Given the testimony of Dr. Eisenberg and the lack of any evidence supporting the released material being human in origin, it cannot be said that law enforcement was aware of any potentially exculpatory value of the material that they did not preserve, and that they were making a conscious attempt to suppress evidence favorable to the defendant. Based on the foregoing, the court finds that the defendant has failed to meet his burden to establish the Wisconsin Statute 968.205 was violated or his constitutional rights were violated under the provisions of Youngblood versus Arizona. As such, the defendant's motion is denied. So, all right. So I read through the whole thing. The summary is, in my uneducated non-lawyer speak. So they're trying to say that there's no proof that those quarry bones are human, and that Eisenberg said way back when that she can't say they're human. So they think it's no big deal that they gave it to the Hallback family. And thank you, Christy, that just messaged me, one of the moderators. That's still, it makes zero sense on why, when this alleged crime happened in 2006, why in 2011 they would be giving any evidence to the Hallback family. So they took into evidence empty bleach containers from Stephen's trailer. Did they give that to the Hallback family? If they're saying these bones at the quarry are not human and not Teresa, why did they go to the Hallback family so many years later? Why was it delivered to a funeral home if it's not Teresa's remains? Why wasn't Stephen or his attorney given notice that they were taking evidence and giving it to the Hallback family? So, but, and I know the moderators have been answering any of your questions there. This was expected. Everybody knew that Judge Flowers, there was no way she was going to approve this. No way, you know, and it's just a matter of, they get so much time to decide. You know that Judge Flowers knew how she was going to rule right away, but stretch it out, steal more of Stephen's life. You know, what do we care? So Kathleen Zellner always wanted it just out of there so she can take it to the next court up. And now I just see this. Hold on a second. So it's all very stupid. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And if it's not Teresa, not even human, why did it go to the Hallback family? I mean, you don't have to be a genius to just look at that. That doesn't add up. So why? And why don't the Hallback family speak up? Why did you take those bones? What did you think they were? What were you told they were? Wouldn't you want the real killer? So this filing is really no big deal. Nothing to get all upset about. It was expected. There's nothing in here that's unexpected. We knew they were going to try and say these things, and Kathleen will take it to the next court. How long that's going to take, I don't know. So that is all that. Let me scroll near the bottom here, since Christy said she had answered all the questions. So I'll just start with this one. Not a question, comment, and I'll just start reading from here down. KZ is happy that it is going to a higher court, but agree with what you are saying. Why? Debbie says, why would the Hallback family even want them? I don't get it. Yeah, and it went to a funeral home. Joseph said, right, why haven't they spoken up? That's somebody replying to somebody else. Valdon says, don't make sense. April says, right, I would want the real killer. Audrey says, they didn't want to pay Stephen out for his first wrongful conviction. Well, and that's all gone. He settled that. So, you know, there's going to be another one once he's finally freed in this one. And geez, how much do you give a man that you've stolen most of his life? Natalie says, anyone know how the Hallback family feel about this? That they have possibly been handed animal bones to bury and not the remains of their daughter, etc. How can they be okay with this evidence being passed to them and it may not be their daughter? What the fuck? Oh, sorry, I shouldn't swear on here. Are they happy they buried animal bones? Even if they believe Stephen is guilty, they should be furious about this. And that's an excellent point, Natalie, if you think about it on that other thing, that have the Hallbacks then been lied to all these years that this was Teresa, but now here they are saying it's not Teresa? Like they haven't been victimized enough. That, you know, they lost a family member. Teresa says, poor guys. Helen says, oh, I don't know what that's about, so I'm just skipping that. Teresa says, so now Judge Flowers has ruled, is KZ taking to appellate court? Correct. That's what she'll be doing, Teresa. Amber says, I can't wait till Zellner proves that he was never guilty. Honestly, Wisconsin law enforcement and legal people need to man up and just fix the wrongs they have done rather than just keep trying to cover it up and taking more and more from him. Stephen will prevail. Carrie says, and why wouldn't they want proof that it is Teresa? If I were in her family, I would want proof that it is her. I would too. Since I'm on the Stephen Avery Project public page, I don't want to swear, even though I've got a dirty mouth. So I'm going to substitute this swear. Danielle says, they're a bunch of lying smurfs. Steve and Brendan are innocent. They were easy targets. They need a new trial. That whole system is wrong. I agree. Okay. April, how are you? Oh my God, I've got so many balls in the air right now. Things are a little crazy. I've got this, then I've got another thing at 7. So I'm crazy. Thanks for asking. Joseph says, it doesn't make sense, but Judge Flowers just came up with this BS because now it's out of her hands, and the corrupt officials can't blame Judge Flowers for giving Stephen a new trial. Exactly, Joseph. Jolene said, if I had an idea that the material given might not be my daughter, I'd be furious. Yeah, me too. Heather says, the Hallbacks have been strange since day one. Well, everybody grieves differently. They don't seem to be like a very touchy-feely family. You know, they seem kind of cold and awkward. And, you know, I don't fault them for that. But I don't understand why they're not questioning things. You know, I totally understand them trusting law enforcement initially because, you know, if you're never in trouble with the law, you have faith in our system. So if the police and attorneys and all that are telling you something, you're just going to believe it. So I don't fault them for that. But once Making a Murderer came out, the part 1, and opened up all this new stuff, you would think that would get you questioning. Audrey says, true, no amount of money can ever give him his years back. And he's lost his family. You know, because remember, he had a wife and a bunch of kids the first time around and lost all them. Then he had a girlfriend who, I mean, she was a sucky girlfriend, so good riddance, you know, goodbye. But, you know, he had a girlfriend and was, you know, about to come into some money that he could, you know, have a better life. And bam, there you go again. Lose everything, lose the girl. It's horrible. Amber, I never understood them as a family. How do you see the injustice and still stand behind the cops? As a mother, I would want to know the truth. Yeah. Elizabeth says, do we know if KZ has spoken to Teresa's family? Surely now they want the truth. I'm not sure on that. I'm sure she's reached out to them, but whether or not she's ever gotten to speak to them, I don't know. I don't recall. Kira says, Hallback family are involved, I think especially the brother. My opinion is that the brother helped plant the RAV4, as well as the ex-boyfriend and the roommate. But I think they thought they were framing a guilty man. So I give them the benefit of that, because I believe they were told by law enforcement, we have all the evidence that Stephen Avery did this. We're now involved in this suit with him. People are never going to believe he did this unless we have something strong to tie him to it. So I think they helped in some capacity with the RAV4. So just like when we talk about the Hallback family on things, same thing goes on this. All right, I get it. What happened to you then? It was not right. It was illegal what you did, but I get it, because if, you know, you killed one of my loved ones and the cops are telling me this person's going to get away with it, I would do whatever I can that justice happened, right? But now when you know you were tricked by Manitowoc, you should be speaking up. You know, I'm sure they have stuff that they could pass on to Kathleen and not be implicated if they're so worried about that. You know, so how do you sleep at night knowing that Stephen and Brendan are innocent and you're keeping them in there? What does that do to Teresa's memory? Karen says, I'm late. What was the new ruling? Karen, the ruling came out yesterday that Judge Flowers denied new trial for Stephen. Kelly says, I missed everything. What's happening now? Is there still a chance Stephen will get a new case? Kelly from Canada. Yeah, it's not over. Kathleen will just move on to the next court. And I see Stephen Avery Project has been answering the questions. Helen says, I absolutely believe he is innocent. And Karen is thanking Stephen Avery Project for answering her. Julie said, were any of her remains found anywhere? As far as I know, the bones that were collected at the burn pit tested to be that they could be from Karen Hallbach's family, the female line, right? There is nothing, as far as I know, there's nothing 100% that says it's Teresa. I know there's other people that say it is, but I think really there's nothing 100% that says it's her. Karen says, Judge is in the police department's pocket. Sheriff's Department. I always forget that. I say police too, but the Manitowoc Police didn't do any of this. It was the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, and those are two different entities. April says, true, they were grieving strange. Barry says, can they not go higher to make this process quicker for the sake of getting Stephen home ASAP for his mother and father? Unfortunately, no. The system is horrible. It's just horrible. Audrey says, they need to throw this case out, period. Corruption on all levels. Danielle says, they are refusing to give them a new trial because half the Manitowoc County legal system is involved. They wanted payback for all the money and years they owe to him, Stephen, and his family. How are his parents? I have not seen anything. Please tell me they are hanging on until this is over. I pray for them. Stephen talks to his mom like every day. His mom's getting older, and as is his dad. So, you know, they're wanting their son home. Justine says, when they said, okay, it's typos, so I'm not sure what it's saying. I court that Bobby's computer was Brendan's. Wasn't this a huge violation? I feel if they didn't lie about the computer, Steve would have never been charged. Justine, I'm really torn on all of that because that goes to ineffective assistance of counsel. Why would Strang and Buting just listen to Kratz when he says, oh, this was Brendan's computer, there's nothing on it, and just accept that and not look at it for yourself? I don't get that at all. Deborah says, I think they are all being threatened, too scared to rule in Stephen's favor. Julie, so she could have been abducted and being held someplace. I don't know. You know, the only thing I know is Stephen and Brendan are innocent. I have my theory, the same theory many have, that the killers are Bobby Dassey and Scott Toddick. But this is, you know, this is just such a mess. Everything was handled so horribly. Kathy says, it's not the grieving process, but knowing what we know. If that were my daughter, I would want answers. Yes. April says, true, that show made us all see things differently. And that's one of the things that always bothers me when guilters will say that anybody that thinks these guys are innocent just went off of a TV show. First of all, there was a lot in that show to show Stephen's innocence. Second of all, there's a lot of us who have gone through and looked at all the evidence, all the filings, listened to interrogations, and on and on and on and on. I didn't just go off of a TV show. So, April, nope, I read that. Audrey, he lost everything. Yeah, it's horrible. You know, his kids don't even know him. You know, his kids moved on. He has like almost no contact with them. It's really sad. And he's got grandkids now too that he doesn't know. April, he looked good and was looking forward to a new life. Then, yes, they took it from him. Lucas, I was on vacation and met many people from that area, and it seems to me they are convinced he's guilty. It would make that place look bad if the truth came out. I think the people in that area don't want to see him out of jail. It would put a label on that place forever. Well, honestly, all right, the family, a lot of them lived at the salvage yard. And most of them have been in some kind of trouble at one point or another. So the family is looked at by people around there is they just don't like them for this reason or that reason. So I think many of the people in the area don't even look to any facts of the case. They just go to, it's the Avery family, so they must be guilty. So, and just because you don't like somebody, their personality or how they live their life or anything like that, it doesn't mean they're a killer, right? April says, that is how it looked to me, the brother somehow involved. And Natasha says, the ex definitely involved. And Audrey says, me too. Yeah. Trisha, that's funny. Helen says, do you believe he will get out of prison? I hope so, but USA is so corrupt, I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm hopeful that he will. I try to stay positive that one day he'll get out. But this system is too freaking horrible. All these people in prison for something they didn't do. There's a case, the Adam Brazil case. I don't know the story on that case. I've never followed it. I have seen it. I know Stephen has supporters like Tanya Henry, David K. Sale, Michael Ryan, who are big supporters of Stephen's innocence, but they've been really deep in this Adam Brazil case. And he just took an Alford plea so he could get out. And so I saw Tanya Henry had done a live because she was at the Brazil family home and there when Adam was home, you know. And it's something that gets me emotional, even though I don't know the case, but it's just, there's so many. And they do not get due process. They do not get a speedy trial. They get railroaded and shoved in there. And then it takes years upon years to get them out. It's just not right. I don't know how you fix it. Do you, should there be some automatic fine system that if somebody is found to, that they were framed by the system, that they automatically get this amount of money from this person and that person and that person, so everybody is held accountable? I don't know how you fix this. We need to start jailing the attorneys. Kratz should be in prison. Wiegert should be in prison. Fassbender, prison. Lank, Colborn, prison. Because maybe if you locked up the people who fixed crime scenes, less would try it. I don't know. Okay, so Stephen Avery Project has been responding. Jolene says, though I think it more likely to be law enforcement to try and frame Stephen, possibly Bobby. Amber says, at the end of the day, it all comes back to Wisconsin. They messed up the first time. They couldn't let him go, even when he proves them wrong. This was their way of trying to save face. But at the end of it, they're going to be the ones who look ridiculous. And then there's more, but I hear you, Amber. Audrey says, sometimes people don't want to hear the truth. Teresa's parents were lied to by lying. It says KZ, but I assume you meant KK for Ken Kratz. Barry says, Stephen Avery Project, Ryan drove the RAV4 with Colborne and Lank followed in a squad car. Natalie says, and when his parents pass away and he's still not freed, no amount of money can make up for the time lost of his life, but especially time with his ailing parents. Disgusting. And his parents can't, they physically can't visit Stephen as much as they would like. So they're losing even more time. So, but I know Stephen talks to his mom almost every day on the phone. So, but yeah, and he loves his parents so, so much. They are the only ones in the family that have always supported Stephen. And it's just, it's a horrible tragedy. Barry said, Stephen Avery Project, he used the spare key to move it, and that's why Colburn and Lank found the key on the 9th search of Stephen's trailer. Yeah, it's a valet key, right? That's what you call it. Olivia, wait, what did KZ lie about to Teresa's parents? I'm confused. I'm assuming they meant to write KK for Ken Kratz. Carrie says, or the Avery's neighbor by the salvage yard. Yeah, that's all the cars drive by. Audrey says, lesson here is never allow your kids to speak to cops unaccompanied like Brendan was. Right. And it's legal. It is legal to take your child out of school without your knowledge or consent and question them. That is legal in almost every state. It's only, now I don't know recently, I haven't checked. It was only Illinois had passed something, but they could only get it for 14 and under. I believe, don't hold me to it, it's a number and I'm so bad. And then California passed something. But I think it's not just kids, Audrey, because I don't know the law. And so plenty of adults confess to crimes they didn't commit. Another case I advocate for, Marnie Yang, and another one, Melissa Kaluzinski. Both of them, adults. Now, Melissa has a low IQ, but both of them confessed. And they didn't do it. So I think all of us should just automatically have a lawyer, no matter what, because you just never know what their narrative's going to be. Jolene says it's very sad for both the Avery and Hallback families. Yes, I agree. Kathy says, I've been following from Canada and am appalled at the corruption and miscarriage of justice. As far as her family, did her brother not saying something in MAM2 that it doesn't really matter if Avery is innocent or not? Oh, God. That won't bring his sister back. I found that very odd. Would you not want to know the truth? Best wishes to Stephen. That wasn't a brother. That was a friend of Teresa's that said that. And yeah, that bothered me a lot too. Well, it doesn't matter if Stephen's guilty or not. Yes, it does. Because whoever killed a person is still roaming the streets and could be killing somebody else. It absolutely matters. That's what happened in Stephen's first case. You get him for an attempted rape, and the real rapist is out there raping other people. Absolutely matters. Amber says, I'm out of the loop. Can someone catch me up real fast? This is just denial yesterday from Judge Flowers that Stephen can't get a new trial. So, but it's no big deal. Kathleen will just take it to the next court. Teresa says, the system is broken and I am truly devastated for all the families involved. Barry says, plus surely Lankin Colburn's testimony must be admissible because they both had the lawsuit against them for the previous incarceration which Stephen was innocent. Paris says, when Stephen gets out, could he reopen his lawsuit for the first wrongful incarceration? He was forced to settle because of the second wrongful accusation. I don't believe he can, but Stephen thinks he can. Stephen told me he will, but I don't know the legalities of that. April says, when I first started to watch, I thought he was guilty too because of family issues. So they had their mind made up. I did too until the show came out and made me think. Right. Teresa says, so what is the next step? Kathleen will just file in the next higher up court. Janet says, could someone please ask Kathleen why the police won't allow her experts to look at the RAV4? Yeah, I don't get that. How can you deny that? How can she not? I don't understand it. And then it just makes it look guilty. If you got nothing to hide, why are you hiding it? So I don't know. Amanda says, just joined. Oh, have you been taken off Stephen's visitors list? Don't know if you have already discussed. Well, that topic is what we call gossip. We have a group called MAM Gossip, and we fully discuss this in there. So join the MAM Gossip group. I did a live in there today discussing all about that. And so you can find out the information there, Amanda. Cassandra, anyone I meet from Manitowoc hate him and his family and think he's guilty. Yeah, I know. Audrey says, just because someone is poor doesn't mean they are guilty. Correct. Stephanie says, thing that got to me was Brendan's confession tape. I have an autistic daughter. Oh, you see that, you know, I know where you're going and it gets me. And when I watched it, I saw a boy who has obviously got Asperger's or something similar. I know he has a low IQ, but do we know what his emotional intelligence score is? I don't know that. I used to talk to Brendan on the phone. I haven't in a long, long time, but he's an adult and would talk to me about video games and stuff like that. So very childlike. So, and he's easily misled. You can get him, you can get him to say anything. You can trick him into thinking anything. Natalie says, you're right, Jax. The Avery family is guilty. Barb, Avery, Tadek, and her husband and other son, Bobby. Do they visit Brendan? Stephen is innocent. Yeah, Barb and Scott visit Brendan, yeah. Bobby says, I'm praying for you, Stephen. I know they don't want to let you out because you will win a major lawsuit against them, one that will bankrupt Manitowoc County. Helen says, there are so many cases it makes me want to be a lawyer, and taking a plea when you didn't do it makes me smurfing mad. I don't, as I said in Adam Brazil's case, I don't know the details of that, but I know from when I visit Marnie Yang in prison, she's like, her freedom is all she cares about. So she's like, if they offered me an Alford plea, you know, her opinion is she just wants out. You know, you don't want to take an Alford plea. So if you want to sue for wrongful incarceration, now you can't. But she's like, she doesn't care about money or whatever. She just wants to be free. And then I completely understand why the West Memphis 3 took the Alford plea. It's because Damian Eccles was on death row and it was killing him. He was losing his eyesight and many other things. It was literally killing him. And you don't know how long because the system drags everything out for so long. So they agreed to the Alford plea just so they could save Damien's life and get him out of prison. And that's horrible that you have to make that choice. Jolene says Kratz should be in prison for the lies he spouts. Yes. Barry says, what is happening with Brendan? Nothing. There's really nothing Brendan's case can really do anymore. It's just waiting to see if Kathleen is able to prove something in Stephen's case that would hopefully help Brendan. Hazel said, surely the Hallback family must have seen and heard the chat and gossip about the case, but the problem is that they would not believe any of what we might find out or say or prove to be true, or, sorry, it just scrolled up on me, or untrue. They love the police, Mike Hallback's own words, and they know a lot of the cops personally, so whatever the cops tell them, they will believe. Yeah. Olivia, how about the medical examiner that the sheriffs let go and told her to hush? They need to be digging deeper there for sure as well. That's bullshit. Yeah, that's the coroner. And, you know, we knew stuff about the coroner prior to Making a Murderer Part 2, but then when you see her in that, I find that heartbreaking as well on what was done to her. Barry says, is there avenues left for him to get a new trial for Brendan? I think it's a slim chance. Helen says the Hallbacks must doubt. Yeah. Julie says, does Josh Verdant have a brother that stayed at deer camp once in a while? I don't know. I don't know the who's all in the Verdant family. And, you know, when I went to the deer camp, you know, it's a pretty bare bones thing. Now, obviously, I didn't go in the trailers, but it didn't look like something that you would really be staying in. But I don't know. Alex says, I still don't understand how Brendan got convicted on the idea that he killed Teresa alone in the bed, and then Stephen got convicted on a different idea for the same crime. So how is this not looked into by the higher courts? I just don't understand. Me either. I don't get it. Natalie says, I know this has been discussed before, but can anyone explain how they got Teresa's day planner out of her car when she was writing in it that day, and then the friend X had it? Did it fly? Exactly. Bingo. You know? Barry says, you can't say you don't talk or trust the police because not every department is so corrupt. The Manitowoc Police Department had a vendetta against Stephen Avery. Well, there's a lot of other stuff, though, that's happened in Manitowoc, not just Stephen's case. So there's something going on with that, the county sheriff's department that is not good. But you're absolutely correct. There are good and bad of everything. Good teachers, bad teachers. Good priests, bad priests. Good cashiers, bad cashiers. No matter what position in life, there's good and bad. Leanne said they won't kill anyone else. Yeah. Sherilyn says KZ has got to have a truck in her back pocket. She will get this Smurf straightened out. Come on, KZ, work your magic. They are not guilty, for the love of God. Michael, KZ needs to find the best gumshoe there is. If someone else did this, there has to be evidence somewhere. Unless this is found and someone else can be charged with this murder, he will remain locked up. I also think Brendan would have been released by the Second Circuit if his attorney had not blown that last hearing. Still don't understand that at all. If that would have been KZ, she would have won that last hearing. Yeah, I was at that hearing, and I was really disappointed in Nyrider's performance. And I like Nyrider. And I know she truly cares for Brendan in this case. But now I do think the state was still worse than her. But she didn't seem on top of it. Leanne says it was a moment of opportunity. Linda says, are they working on another Netflix series to show the latest information? We don't know. they've always got to be working on something. You know they're going to have to cover another thing because Making a Murderer Part 2 was a success. And the case continues and there's more story to be told. So I'm sure they will do another one. But we don't know how long that'll take and, you know, when it would come out, you know, so it's going to be a while. And that's one of the questions we are asked the most all the time is about Making a Murderer 3. Trust me, if we find out that Part 3 is for sure happening, we will post it immediately. Carrie says, I cannot wait until KZ gets this overturned. My heart aches for them. Lisa says, they both are innocent and this is just crazy injustice. Hazel, the Hallbacks are very naive and seem to have led quite sheltered lives, so they could be taken in by Kratz and his crony cops. Yeah. Kimberly says, where is the RAV4? Who has it? They claim they have it in storage somewhere, but maybe they gave it to the Hallback family. Said it wasn't the real RAV4. I don't, yeah. So allegedly it's in evidence. Victoria says they probably got rid of the RAV4 and don't want to admit it, LOL. Audrey says, I love Kathleen. She's awesome. I hope she solves this case. It's so wrong on all levels. Lucas says, Stephen's lawyer said this wouldn't be a quick process in many interviews. Isn't 7 years the typical amount of time she's been able to turn these cases around? I believe she said 15 years. But I'm bad with numbers. But I believe it was 15. Justine says, I am in a rush and loving this. Does anyone know if I can watch this after or only as a live? You'll be able to watch it after if you're even still here. It will be kept up on Stephen Avery Project. And it will also be shared in the Stephen Avery Project closed group and the MAM gossip group. Leanne says, I will wait till I see another update. Sherilyn says, they say 70 for Brendan. Hey, who's doing what? Sorry. Dog making a noise that sound like getting in trouble. Marguerite says, hi, Jax from Ireland. Please leave this live up so I can watch tomorrow. So tired now as it's 12 a.m. Good night, all. Have a good evening, Marguerite. Yes, it will stay up. Tracy says, my son is like Brendan. Brendan's really sweet. Kira said, KZ said on Twitter it could take up to 15 years. Okay, so I was right on the 15. Leanne said, we could only hope to bankrupt them. Barry says, I'm sure his IQ at the time was 97, which was classed as below average. I remember 70 in the 70s. But don't hold me to it again. That's a number. Tracy says, these young boys are so easily led by wrong-uns. Trisha says, I'm here just multitasking and listening. Lisa says, I hope KZ brings the whole entire state of Wisconsin down. What they've done to these two is just so horrible. So much framing going on. Audrey says, the cops lied to Brendan. They said he could go home if he admitted his guilt. All he wanted was to go home and watch WWF. My heart bleeds for Brendan. Well, remember, he thought he was going to go back to class and turn in an assignment. That's the hardest thing to watch in all of Making a Murderer, is that interrogation of Brendan, and then Michael O'Kelly. Sign this, fill this out. Check one of these boxes. I'm sorry for what I did, or I'm not sorry for what I did. No box to check saying I'm innocent. Oh, that is... Lisa says, what's up with the other brother of Brendan's that had all that nasty on his computer? Well, that would be Bobby, and I believe he's the real killer. So that's what's up with Bobby. Bobby's staying quiet. Bobby left social media. Teresa says, why can't Brendan get another trial? Because he has exhausted, I believe, all his opportunity for appeal. He went all the way up to the Supreme Court and was denied. So I think he is just, but, you know, I don't understand the system, because like I'm told in other cases that I advocate for, that, okay, the state is out of an extension. They can't ask for any more time. So this is really going to be the court date. And then the state gets another extension. Because the Melissa Kaluzinski case is another case that Kathleen is the attorney for. And Melissa was supposed to be going to court, or there was a hearing scheduled for next week, for Wednesday. And we were told there couldn't be any more extensions, and now they just got one. And so what I was told is it is because Kathleen doesn't want the state to be able to say we didn't have enough time to prepare. She's given them all the world time to prepare. But while I understand that, their Melissa sits in prison. Well, you keep cutting slack to the state so they can't whine that they didn't have it, but they're going to whine they didn't have whatever anyway. So now their Melissa sits in prison. And the prison Melissa is in, and I get it, it's prison, but there's no air conditioning. It's been very hot. It's miserable. And so the two girls that I advocate for, Melissa and Marnie, are in the same prison. So when I go to visit, I visit one in the morning and then one in the afternoon. And then they will both tell me similar stories, just also about how freaking hot and miserable it is in there. So both of them were looking forward to hopefully getting out before the summer. And so now both of them, and just like when we talked about earlier on Stephen, when, you know, they try to look on the bright side, now both of them are like, but this will be my last summer here. This will be it. This is the last summer I will have to deal with this. Hello, Pat. Helen says, you are a legend for doing this. Keep your spirit high and your truth real. Well, thank you. Julie says, Cuss Road crime scene truck, ambulance, land surveyors, retired detective Bushman called in to assist, road blocked off, hundreds of pics, but not available to see by anyone. I wish someone would request those pics taken by the surveyors. Could somebody file a Freedom of Information Act request? Alex says, what else has been happening in the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department? You said other wrong things have happened. Well, there's the Ricky Hochstetler case. There's the Carmen Bootwell case. So I know of two others that something's not right there, and the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department is attached to it. So you could look into those. We've already been on for over an hour, so I'm not going to dive into them. But you could look into those. Or if you go into MAM Gossip, that's where we also talk about other cases. I don't know if you're already a member in there, but we talk about other cases in there. So you could bring it up in Gossip. You know, on Stephen Avery Project, people only want to hear about Stephen stuff. So in MAM Gossip, we talk about the other ones. Paula also agrees with the 15 years. Stephanie also thought it was 70. Michael says, Stephen's IQ was 74 or 76. Brendan was 83, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I never remember the exact numbers, but it's something I try to remind people of, is people never realize that Stephen's IQ is lower than Brendan's. Kimberly says, I can't hardly watch when they tear Brendan apart. Oh, yeah. Sand says, I thought he wasn't denied. I thought he was granted, and then something happened. No, Sand, that's because of an article. I mean, we posted it here in Stephen Avery Project. I'm sure other pages did as well. That is what is referred to as a clickbait article, because the headline is misleading. And so by the headline of that article, it made people think that Stephen was granted a due trial. But in reality, the article was they had a couple different like legal experts give their opinion on if Stephen would be granted a new trial. And it was like 2 said yes and 1 said no. So no, that was just an article and people giving their opinion. Natalie says, is there still a rumored documentary proving their side, which Kratz took part in for the other side? Thought I read this somewhere. If they're so confident, where is it? And can't wait to see what new crap they spout in it. That is filmed. I can't remember what it's called. I don't think, did we post that clip here on Stephen Avery Project? We might have only put it in MAM Gossip. But there's a scene with Kratz in that, and the interviewer really kind of screws with Kratz, and Kratz comes out looking horrible in it. But the problem with that documentary is they can't find an outlet that will buy it to air it. So they made it, but nobody wants it. So that's why. But I think you could probably search on YouTube and find clips that they had put up there on that, from that. Audrey says, how many years was Brendan sentenced to serve? Oops, see, that's a number thing. I'm not good with it. I want to say 30 something. Was it? I don't know. Alex says, does Stephen understand that Brendan was manipulated into telling a story that never happened, or is Stephen upset with Brendan for convicting them both? Both. He understands and he's mad. He goes back and forth. Julie says, I was under the impression that Brendan could still have a habeas corpus filing. I may be confused. He may be. I don't know. I readily admit I don't know our legal system. Teresa says we should picket. It won't do anything. A rally, picketing, it doesn't do anything. So I know it's sad. Neil says, there are many of us lurkers around the world hoping and waiting for a just outcome. Never give up. The time will come, from Australia. Thank you, Neil. And I'm really amazed by all the supporters Stephen has from all around the world. You know, and it, you know, it's amazing to me that this case touches everyone everywhere. Tina says, from Australia too, always keeping as informed as possible, wishing and hoping. Kimberly says, I find when I've watched Making a Murderer, both 1 and 2, I notice more and more things. Yeah, I agree. You know, I miss stuff. For me to sound like a bragger or whatever. So I watched part 2 the night it came out. And then one of the moderators here said, oh, I saw you in Making a Murderer. And I'm like, you saw me in Making a Murderer? And she's like, yeah, you're in a scene. And I had never seen it. I had to go back, and then I saw me. And it's nothing. It's just my back. It's nothing. Paula says, my granddaughter is 10 in the 4th grade. Mother have no air conditioning. I'm going to guess. Okay. What is denied? A new trial. Karen says, how do they keep getting away with this corruption of law? Makes me so mad. I know. Kimberly says, has Stephen's brother ever been in trouble? Oh, yes, they all have. They all have records. All of them. The only one, if you search from the Avery family, is Dolores. She's the only one that doesn't have anything. Barry. If there has been other wrongdoings by Manitowoc County, the new governor has to look into the way Manitowoc go about things and look back into all the county's convictions. Well, that's the thing, Barry. It's that can of worms, you know, because once you prove that they did this to Stephen and Brendan, now everybody else prosecuted will say, look at my case. Cindy says, you should put it on YouTube. That would be so freaking awesome to see. William said, when this goes to the appeals court, can Kathleen release all the evidence that she found? I don't think she would, because you don't ever show all your cards. Because if you don't win there, you still need to have something new to try again. So I don't think, the only time we would ever see everything she has is if Stephen was free. Lisa says, every time I think about this, I hope KZ wins the case. Yeah. Audrey says, 30 years is no joke. Went in an innocent child. Yeah. Natalie says, thanks, Jax. Didn't know the documentary was finished. I'll check YouTube. Need a laugh. Can't wait to see Sweaty Sweat again. I don't think you can find the whole documentary, Natalie. I think you can only see certain scenes that they've uploaded as a tease to try and get somebody interested in it so they'll buy it to air the whole thing. San says, I was talking about Brendan being released and then something happened and he wasn't a while back. Yeah, it was, his conviction was overturned and then they took it up higher and up higher reversed it back. Barry says, what's the name of that documentary with KK looking like a twonk? Is it Convicting a Murderer? Something like that. Claudia says, love you, Jackson, Stephen from Ireland. Well, we're just talking about Australia and there's Ireland. Thank you very much. Rianne says, why was new trial denied? Because they're claiming that they did nothing wrong. The judge is siding with the state that they did nothing wrong by giving those bones to the Hallback family. Lisa says, why haven't they looked more into Bobby? I don't understand that. Because they need Stephen in prison. They don't care if Bobby is the killer. They don't care who killed her. They just want Stephen in prison so they don't have to pay him. Paula said, oops, my granddaughter is 10 years old in the 4th grade and her school has no air conditioning in their schools. Yeah. So, all right, I'm down to the bottom and I've been on for almost an hour and a half and I have a call I have to be on in just a half hour. So I am down to the end. So I'll end this now, but the filing has been posted here so you can read it for yourself. If anything new happens with the case, we will post it immediately. Anytime we get news on it, we get it posted. Stephen Avery Project is where we talk just about this case. Then we also have a closed group called MAM Gossip, where we talk about this case, drama that surrounds this case. Then we talk about other cases. Then there's also the Marnie Yang case that I'm working on, that we now have a group that's called WMP Justice Review Citizen Investigators. And with that group, you first have to go to the Marnie Yang website and register and make a donation of $10. And then you're accepted into a Facebook group where in the Marnie Yang case, we are releasing evidence in her case that's never been seen. So crime photos, phone calls, police reports, all those kinds of things, because we want fresh eyes on Marnie's case. We are filing for Marnie in September to try and get her a new trial. She's been in prison for 10 years. So if you're interested and want to get really involved in that, that's the WMP Justice Review Citizen Investigators, but you have to join on the Marnie Yang page first to get in there. And thank you, people saying it's Convicting a Murderer. Okay. So, all right. So I am out to eat something real quick before my call in a half hour. And we will talk as soon as, you know, there's something new in Stephen's case. Thank you, everybody.